My name is Shepard Ogden, and I'm here from Burlington, Vermont, which is very similar to Missoula, I'm pleased to say. I like Burlington and I like Missoula. And I'm here sort of as a representative of a group that I'm part of, and if you all would like some of these, here they are. Burlington's very lucky to have in the center of the city 1,300 acres of open land. About 600 of it is wetlands. About another 600 is potentially arable, though a lot of it is already spoken for in various reasons. And I want to give you a tiny bit of background first on how that fits into the bioregion of the area. Burlington's on the eastern shore of Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain is due south of Montreal. It's about, at our area, it's 11 miles wide. It's variable in width, and it's very deep. We consider it one of the Great Lakes. It's 150 miles long, opens into the St. Lawrence in one direction, and was channeled through into the Hudson in the other direction. It is where some of the first settlement in that part of the country happened, the European settlement. And it is fed by 3 or 4 major water sources. There's Otter Creek, there's Lewis Creek, there's the Winooski River, which is not a Polish name. It's actually Winooskik, which was the name of the tribe of the Abenaki that lived there. Means onion in English. And then there's the Lamoille and the Missisquoi. Those are the major U.S. tributaries flowing into the Lake Champlain. And most of the arable land is on the east side in Vermont. The Adirondack Mountains drop almost right into it on the western side. On the eastern side, we've got about 20 miles of valley before we come to the mountains, such as we call them. They're not much bigger than the hills you've got right around here, around Missoula. But to us, they're mountains. And the Intervale itself is basically the floodplain delta of the Winooski just before it enters Lake Champlain. And it's a very interesting little microclimate because there's a bluff that runs along the lake for the northern part of Burlington and its harbor, and then up about another 2 miles, and then there's an opening in this bluff where the Winooski flows out. And from the fall line, which is between the cities of Burlington and Winooski, out to that bluff where it goes through the classic looping mature form, and all of that is technically floodplain out in there. So it was never really developed. And so it was also the original home of the Abenaki in that area. And when the first settlers came, it was the farm of Ethan Allen, who is arguably the most famous Vermont person. When I was at the University of Vermont back in the 60s, it was pretty much a hobo jungle and a dump, and there was the city dump was down in there. There was an abattoir. There were all kinds of junk cars. The last 2 farms in the city were pretty much defunct, and the only reason anybody even knew it was there was that Rolling Stone magazine printed a report that there were 18-foot marijuana plants down there, which pretty much emptied out the dorms within 5 or 10 minutes. And a lot of the university students found out that this land was there in the middle of the city. But nothing much was done with it, and I left University of Vermont in '71 and went through a number of things, but eventually went back to my town in southern Vermont, started an organic farm, did that for 25 years, built a seed catalog, which some of you may know, called the Cook's Garden, and then eventually moved my operations back up to the Intervale after a friend of mine named Will Rapp, who founded a company called Gardner's Supply, moved Gardner's Supply down into the edge of the Intervale about 10 or 12 years ago and took it upon himself and his other people to start a foundation called the Intervale Foundation, which used profits from Gardner's Supply to bring this land back into cultivation and supply food for the city of Burlington. Because in Vermont, 85% of our electricity is nuclear and 85% of our food is Californian. And we don't really like that. So we have been working a long time on developing our alternate energy sources, which has been difficult, and trying to get sustainable regional food jump-started again. And I moved the trial gardens of my seed company back up there 6 years ago as part of an attempt to reach critical mass with this operation. The goal of the foundation was to produce 10% of the food that Burlington uses year-round. And we're up at about 5% now. And we're moving closer to critical mass all the time. And I'll explain briefly why that matters in a moment. But first I want to quickly run down what we have there. The first operation that was put in was, and for those of you who don't know, we have a congressman, the only independent congressman in the Congress, Bernie Sanders, who you may or may not like personally if you're from Burlington. But he's been a very good representative. He was originally the mayor of Burlington, and a lot of this started when he was the mayor of Burlington. And one of the first things that was done was we set up, when I say we, I'm talking about the foundation, not myself. I was not involved in these things until 6 years ago. I was coming in and consulting, but I'm not, please don't think I'm saying I did this. It's just easier to say we. We set up a composting operation for the city that included a regulation that all of the yard waste and leaves and all of this kind of thing had to be brought down to the Intervale, or your landscapers had to bring it down to the Intervale. And it was combined with the food waste from the university, the hospitals, Ben & Jerry's, and a whole number of the restaurants in the city. Not at first. It took a number of years to get this to where people would pay attention to it. But at this point, we're kicking out, I think it's somewhere in the order of 30,000 cubic yards of compost a year. And I see this because my garden is the first thing that you see when you come down into the Intervale. I'm kind of anal about my gardens, and so when I moved up there, they gave me the spot just right where you have to drive by it. And I'll explain why that is in a minute. But the point is, I see the trucks going by all the time with the leaves and the food waste, and I see the trucks going out with the compost all the time. It's very encouraging. That operation actually throws off multi-thousands of dollars in profits every year now, which go back into the foundation. And what the foundation's main activity at the moment is incubating young farmers. We have farmers who are committed to being market growers of various kinds of food. It isn't just vegetables. And they are essentially brought into the collective, which is the Farmers Collective of the Foundation. And after an interview process, they are allowed to join, and they get inexpensive land rent, they get inexpensive access to the compost, they get access to all of the equipment of the foundation, and the foundation owns 3 or 4 tractors. We have bush hogs, we have manure spreaders, we have cultipackers, we have a Tuffy High G tractor for cultivation. We have all of the equipment that would be necessary to run a serious vegetable operation, and it's available on a sign-out basis to the 15 farmers who are members of this collective, of which I am one. And what that allows to happen is for young people who want to learn how to become market growers to come to the Intervale. They have to have a certain level of experience already, and that's what's determined in the interview process. And then they essentially get surrounded by older people such as myself who've been doing this for a long time, and then this middle ground of people who've been doing it 5 or 10 years. They have access to the equipment, they have access to the expertise, and they get this minor subsidy of inexpensive inputs and inexpensive land and water. We rent space in the greenhouse. We have 5 greenhouses that we share. There's 6 people in my greenhouse that I rent 300 square feet in. All of this is to try and get an educated group of food producers in the next generations going forward. Okay, and these are the people that are producing this 5%. There are really only 2 farms that are sort of permanent there. One is called the Intervale Community Farm, which is designed precisely to provide a community CSA for Burlington residents. It's the largest CSA in Vermont, has 400 members, and that's a semi-permanent one, and I'm a semi-permanent one because I'm there essentially as a resource for these younger people. In terms of our seed research, and our garden has 1,350 different items in it, all of which had to be planted by Wednesday to come here on Thursday. We'll ignore what the weather's been like. I hear it's been just as bad here. Point is that that's one of the major operations, is to jumpstart this. The total number of CSA members in the city is about 700 when you add together all of the different producers. We have poultry producers, we have flour producers, we have 2 or 3 vegetable producers, and then we have 2 or 3 seed producers, including me. All the seed producers are a very small thing. We're moving forward with that. We have a SARE grant for next year to do seed-saving workshops and outreach. That's the second real part of what the Intervale Foundation does, is outreach, and we have a number of kinds of outreach. One thing we're doing, we've just started a riparian nursery. Unfortunately, all of the native plants that are used for riparian plantings in Vermont come from Montana, which, no offense, they shouldn't. They come from Lawyer Nursery, because that's the only person who's producing them at a low enough price for the state to be able to use them for land restoration. We want them to be from our local genome. There's no profit in it at this point. This is what the foundation specializes in, is putting money into these operations early so that they can get up to a scale where they can be profitable, so they can start throwing off money to support an agricultural infrastructure that used to exist and doesn't exist anymore. Okay, and so there's that aspect. Then there's also, we have a low-income outreach, which basically subsidizes CSA shares for low-income people, and this intervale happens to be in the low-income neighborhood because wastelands tend to be in low-income neighborhoods. So we've got that happening. We've also got outreach into the schools. We bring in, we're one of these towns, which I gather from being at the farmers market that Missoula also is, where this whole new class of immigrants that we're getting here in the 90s and 21st century, they're being settled in these small cities out in the provinces of America. Missoula seems to be one of those. Burlington is definitely one of those. Our library brochures in Burlington are now in 9 languages, including Tibetan and Cambodian, and I assume it's fairly similar here. We're doing outreach and helping integrate those food cultures into our own food culture. I, in particular, do a lot with that because I have these trial gardens with so many different vegetable varieties. We're outreaching to chefs and to consumers to do that. We also have and this is where I fit in to a certain extent, we do a lot of bringing people in. You'll see in this thing we have a big festival in September, has 3,000 people. We bring between 7 and 20,000 people, depending on whose guess you take, a year through this operation. And mine is set up precisely to end all questions about whether or not an organic garden can be productive and or beautiful and or produce a lot. And we don't have to have any signs or any discussions, because we put the resources there to make it look better than any garden that you've ever seen before. And it's all organic. It uses nothing but of course, it's very nice to be able to call down to the compost plant and have them show up in 5 minutes with a payloader with 6 yards of fresh compost. That doesn't hurt. And it doesn't hurt that the land when we got there was 7% organic matter and a pH of 7. These are definite advantages. But the point is, it's a propaganda affair as much as anything. And going forward, that's where we're really headed, okay? The next step we have starting July 1st is we're breaking ground in the last days of the Clinton administration. We finally got approved, I think it was a $3 million grant to build a zero emissions food processing plant. And I don't know how many of you have heard of Ocean Arcs International and the Living Machines, but John Todd and Nancy Todd are on the faculty at UVM and working down in the Intervale with us to have living machine technology. My garden was right next to one of the living machines. We're putting a whole new set of living machines into this thing, which is going to be called the Intervale Community Food Processing Facility. We just call it the Eco Park, because it's going to be a place where value-added foods can be created for the city and where freezing and canning can be done for the city with absolutely no emissions. And we have a 10,000 square foot greenhouse that's going to be running off the waste heat of the town power plant, which is directly adjacent. This is not a pretty place necessarily. I was very interested to see that the mud garden was right next to the railroad tracks. We're in the same situation because these spaces tend to open up in places that were once not so prime in the city. That's the only reason they were left open. So going forward, we're going to have this processing facility there too. And that's the key in the end. And that's what I want to leave you with, is what we're trying to do, just like I'm trying to prove that organic is not only as good but superior, okay, just by doing it, okay? We also want to answer the question and the complaint and the criticism of a lot of these small-minded, flat earth economic thinkers who say that you guys are so pie in the sky, your ideas are never going to work because they won't fit within the economic system. They are uneconomic. And we come back and we say, the only reason they're uneconomic is because you've got all of these hidden subsidies in there. And the talk this morning went over a number of these subsidies from a number of different angles, though we didn't ever actually call them subsidies. That's what my talk was about, in a sense. The point is that the reason that these things have never been shown to work in a way that these other critical people will accept them is simply because they have never been allowed to be erected in sufficient scale to attain the critical mass necessary to prove their efficacy, okay? And as long as they can keep us from assembling a fully functioning unit on a population level that matters, we're never going to be able to stop that argument, okay? And in Burlington, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It's why I moved up there, okay? I moved up there because it's a really exciting place to be, because we're going to put together a system, and people are going to come and see that system, and they're going to have to shut up. That's all I got to say. And then we want other people like you to come and see it, and go to other places like Missoula, like Louisville, like San Antonio, all of these places where there are possibilities to do this kind of thing. And in that sense, we're looking at ourselves as a viral factor, okay? We were talking in the talks this morning about the pollen blowing across the landscape, okay? We want to put up a lot of pollen and have it blow across the landscape and have this stuff come down in other spaces in the U.S. once we've proved to the critics that you will all run into in your own towns who say it can't be done, and you'll be able to say, what do you mean it can't be done? It's working there. That is a vile climate, and it's working there. Thanks. The question was, how are they doing the large-scale composting? And the answer is using very conventional technology. Basically, it's done the way it works functionally. It's a very industrial-looking site. And the trucks come in, they go across a truck scale, they get weighed, then they leave, they get weighed again, so you know the net weight that they're leaving. They pay a tipping fee based on the amount of waste they're bringing. That's then used to calculate the amount of carbon input you need, because that's basically where the nitrogen's coming from. Then they have a large payloader. They scoop out of the leaf pile the proper amount of carbon to go with the nitrogen that they've weighed coming in, and they put it in huge long windrows, and then they have one of those very expensive and ridiculous machines that does large-scale composting. You've ever seen them? They're these big two-legged things, and they have a what, if you use machinery, is a flail mower. That's what those big composting machines are. They're this huge arc that goes down the windrow, and hanging down from it is a bunch of flails, and it flails the pile, and that's the way it gets made. It gets made in windrows that are about 100 yards long and about 12 feet tall, and about 20 feet across. That's the scale on which it's done. I've seen it done on larger scale in San Antonio. This is not a really large compost operation.
How tall is that flail?
The thing itself is probably 25 feet tall, and the cab is up on the top. It's a special purpose machine that's made just for this, and they're in a fair number of places around the country, and that's the biggest single expense, because just like a flail mower, it's a very high maintenance machine, and essentially the piles are then created, and then they're brought by payloader over to a big sifter. Once it's mature, it's brought to a big sifter. Classic thing from an excavation operation. It's one of those conveyors that goes up like this. It goes into a thing that looks like a carrot washer, and then the carrot washer thing has different size holes up it, and it turns like a screw, so that you get rough, smooth, smoother, smoothest. And then they sell the different grades at different prices, and actually some of it is mixed into potting soil and sold by mail in our catalog. We sell the stuff by mail in our catalog, but it's not a really good mail order item because it's heavy. But that is how some of it is dealt with. Yes.
Have you ever had any reservations about what
It's always a problem when you're using municipal waste, but we're not. You see, we're not using municipal sewage sludge. That goes to a whole separate place. There is a municipal sewage plant. We're not using that. What we're using is food waste, and everything that is being used goes by the administrative offices and is, on view all the time. So there's no industrial waste going in whatsoever. Yes.
What about heat waste?
I don't know the technical answer to that. Is there an ethical objection to that? Well, a large part of the reason for that is you don't want to attract dogs that are just going to make a mess, and this is not that kind of situation. All of the food waste that comes in is buried within 5 minutes. Not because of that, but because on Lake Champlain we have seagulls. And there are 10,000 seagulls around this place all the time. So all the food waste is covered up within 5 minutes. Yes?
So I would be concerned about the meat waste having, like chicken having antibiotics, or...
There actually is a concern with that, but it comes from a different angle, which is that we use waste from a chicken farm. And you can be sure that there's antibiotics in that. And I don't know the technical answer to how they deal with that. If you're curious to know, you can reach any of these people who are managing the operation at intervale.org. There's a website, and a question like that could be directed to them. We just had, if you want an idea of how democratic and collective this is, the 15 farmers, we meet once a month. Our meeting was Wednesday afternoon, just before I had to get all the stuff planted to come here. And you know how collective meetings can be. They don't run right on the clock. I'm sort of getting a little antsy. But the previous meeting a month ago, there is a big controversy in Vermont right now where a bunch of Quebecers have built a 250,000 chicken laying operation. And it violated Vermont's big farm law. We have very tight environmental laws and a lot of hassle if you try and mess with them. But agribusiness interests exist there just as they do anywhere else. they said, oh, that's all we want. Yeah, and they're causing trouble for all of the dairy farmers around them because of flies in the manure and everything, and they have to get rid of the manure. The Intervale took the manure to get it out of the community where it is. Now they want to expand it to 750,000, right? And they say, no problem. The Intervale will take the manure, you know, and on one hand, there's one group of people within the composting operation who say, yeah, we're cool, we can take everything you can throw at, you know, because they're macho about being able to compost everything. And composters are like that. I don't know how many of you know, but they really are macho. And they had a real problem because, you know, the people who get recruited into the farm system tend to be highly educated environmental majors from colleges. They come out of programs like yours. You don't go basing their business on 750,000 layer operations. They don't like it. And so one woman in particular, Sarah DeSantis, took it on herself to say that, you know, we simply won't allow this to happen. If we're your supposed constituency, we're not going to allow this to happen. And she went to the board of directors of the foundation and said, you know, I'm going to fight you all the way on this. And she came to the collective meeting where the representatives of the foundation were there and made a motion that we refuse to support this. And it passed unanimously. And they had to drop it. So they're not, well, we're still taking the old stuff, but we refused to take the new stuff in the assumption and hope that that will cause the permit to be denied, because there will be no manure management plan if we don't take it. And that was what was about. So that's it in that sense. And those of you who heard me talk this morning, I talked about different forms of ownership and different forms of paradigms for agriculture. This is exactly what I mean. You put the democratic aspect in there, and all of a sudden you've got a way to make it, you know, to make it respond to your needs. And none of us wanted it in there. I mean, we were going to have this long-winded discussion about it, and as soon as the foundation people were out of the room, they were going to go into this long discussion. I just raised my hand and said, wait a minute, before we have this discussion, is there anybody here who thinks it's a good idea? You know, and there wasn't anybody who thought it was a good idea. So it took 30 seconds. Anyway, yes.
As soon as I figure out what to do with this thing, it's on. All right. My name's Bright Spirit. I'm from Spokane, Washington, so not too far away. What was it, a 3.5-hour drive from here. And I'm the executive director of an environmental organization there. It's called PEACH, People for Environmental Action in Children's Health. We're a very young organization, if you haven't heard of us. So have a lot of people in Spokane also have not heard of us, because we're going to be 2 years old in August. But we're doing some really dynamic things. And what is an environmental organization doing here talking about local food systems? Well, most of the folks that are on our board are parents, and we ended up together because we were really concerned about what our children's bodies were made out of. In other words, the industrial chemicals that were being found in our children's urine and blood and fat tissue. And so we began to educate ourselves about cleaning products and pesticides on food and hormones and meat and milk. And the further we got into it, the more we realized that we had a pretty big problem. It's been 3 generations since any child was born without industrial chemicals in their bodies, and we're all contaminated at this point. Our breast milk's contaminated, the fluid in our uterus is contaminated, and whatever is part of our environment is part of our body and part of our babies. Once we really got that, we were enraged. So we've got this enraged group of parents who want to change the world, and we want action, and we want it cleaned up, and we want it now. So we started having meetings, and meetings go on, and we brought in a holistic strategic facilitator to help us plan. And he said, well, what do you want? And we said, well, we want clean air and clean water, and we want our babies to be in our wombs without industrial chemicals. And he's like, okay, pretty tall order. And he said, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, we have to get out there and we have to gain the trust of the people in our community, which means we need to spend time with them. And we're an environmental organization and people have really busy lives. And how do you get people to come into your environmental organization every week and hang out with you? Right. So we knew we had to plug into something that people do every day. I also happen to be an organic farmer. I have a very large passion for organic farming. I started the CSA that is in our area, which is now up to 100 families. And I was able to turn that over, so I'm not doing that. I'm not farming now. Wah. But when I am old, I promised myself that I will get to farm again. But I know that the work I have to do is what I'm doing now, and I think you'll be convinced of that before we're done here. So what we knew is that we needed to, I also study history, and if you look at any major revolution in history, Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, what you'll find is that 1% of the people felt strongly about something. 1%. That's all it takes. We start getting overwhelmed thinking that, gosh, those big giant corporations, you know, the David and Goliath scene. All we need is 1% of us. If 1% of us are educated and are making good choices daily in our lives, it's all over for them. So don't think it's such an uphill battle that it appears to be. We will change this around. So we knew that we wanted 1% of Spokane, basically, to speak with a single voice. In Spokane, we have 400,000 people, if you include the outskirts of Spokane. And we knew that if we had, 50 or 100 families show up at a city council meeting, the press would be there. The city council meeting would not be able to even get any work done with that many people, especially children and families, all there creating a ruckus about whatever issue. So we know that if we can speak with a unified voice, if we can trust each other to speak with a unified voice, we can create just about any kind of change. Okay. So what if you could walk into a store and all the products in that store were researched for safety and for health? The store had a zero waste policy, so they created no trash in their store, basically, or that's what they were working toward. They would buy locally produced and grown products. They would create local farms. They would create local production of, everything you use, soap, clothes, shampoo. It would create community. You'd have a staff policy within the store that was based on the individual wellness of the people in that store. You would have fair pay throughout the organization so that the person on top who's keeping track and kind of running the whole thing isn't making a whole lot more than the person who's swapping out the toilets. And that it would be child-friendly, that children would be welcome on this premises. This is what we visioned, and this is what we knew we wanted, and poof, we created it. Every 7 minutes in this country, you're told that you're hungry, you're thirsty, you're sick, you're fat, you're sexually frustrated, and you need to buy a car. The average high school student sees 350,000 TV commercials before they graduate out of high school. With that kind of input into your psyche and the greenwashing and all the things that come with that, it's no wonder that we walk into our conventional grocery store and we pick up our 30 items to clean our bathroom with, and we don't think twice about it. So, anyone here know what the average age of the target audience of McDonald's is? 4, 3, 10, 18 months. They know that they have to seriously have those kids hooked by the time they're 5 or they've lost them. So, all right, so going to get back to this store because the store is what it is. What it is we're dealing with. So I'm going to start with my little props. Here we go. We opened this store. We went to a local developer and said, hey, you've got this block full of buildings that's empty. We've got this fabulous idea for this really cool, innovative project. Will you let us use the space, and as we're able to pay you, we'll pay you. You'll look good, we'll look good. And they said, yeah, sure, that's great. We're trying to develop this part of our town. And so rent-free, we got a space that we shared with artists and other people to set up our store once a week. That started in November. We had 13 families. What they did is we would send them a price list online of organic vegetables. We started with a produce house. You have to start somewhere. You have your vision, but you have to start somewhere. So we started in the fall when we knew there was no local production happening with a produce warehouse who had values that we could be in tune with. There are several produce houses. This particular one has helped small farms survive, buys from small quantities from local growers. So we picked them because they were the best of the bad guys, if you will. We need to cut out the middlemen out of our lives, but this is doing this in steps. So they would get a price list. They'd say, hey, I want 5 pounds of apples, 2 pounds of bananas, a pound of ginger, a pound of limes. We would compile all that together, put in an order. On Friday, folks would show up, pack boxes, and people would pick up a pre-packed box. That's what we started with in November with 13 families. We now are at 2 days a week. We have 100 families. So this is, in 6 months or 7 months or 8 months? I don't even know where we're at anymore. I can't keep track of it. But it's growing really fast. A lot of articles have been written about us in the paper, and we actually hold orientations. They have to come to a class in order to be able to participate in this, and they're signed up for months in advance for these classes because we slowed the growth down to make sure it was going to be manageable. The first thing we tell them in that class is, we are not here to save you money, and we are not here to sell you food. Let's get that really clear. And so they go through an hour-long class about what are we dealing with our environment, what is in Windex, why do we need to start making different choices, how do we speak as a unified voice for policy change in our city. And a little perk you get is that you get the very freshest, best organic food available to you at the lowest cost. But that just happens to be a perk. That's not why we're here. Product safety. We write product fact sheets. These fact sheets will be on our website starting in September, and we hope that those fact sheets alone will create quite a stir around the world, certainly across the U.S. and the whole food industry. Anybody recognize this product? If you happen to be an organic food eater, you probably consume a lot of this, or certainly have eaten it at times. I have served this product to my children. Who knows how many hundreds of dollars I have spent on this. So this was one of the products. We write in our newsletter, we have a Chem of the Month section. So we take a chemical and we research it. And yeah, there it is. And, actually, well, no, you'll get distracted. It's a really good newsletter. When we started researching that, I had to call this company because I made the link to the fact that they took these really, who is this company, General Mills? I mean, General Mills. It is General Mills. Muir Glen is General Mills. It's a huge company. It's not some little tiny homegrown, lovely looking company like the can looks. They did start out small, but we need to be aware of this. And what is the point of General Mills? And what was the point of Muir Glen? To make money. I mean, initially there might have been some folks that had the right idea. They wanted to get organic food to people. But, you've got to look at the end goal. What is our goal? This white liner in this can is called bisphenol A. Bisphenol A causes birth defects in lab animals. They take your organic food, they stick it in a can, they autoclave it so that it goes to really high temperature and pressure. And then you're supposed to eat this and feed this to your children. We do not carry this product at Peach Safe Food, and we have a fact sheet that'll show up on the web sometime in September. Windex. We think of Windex as this just like innocuous, it's no big deal. It's just Windex. Windex has 2-butoxyethanol in it. 2-butoxyethanol in the factory, when they manufacture this, these folks have to have full aeration. Their whole body has to be covered. They've got really thick rubber gloves onto here. They have an apron that is like covering most of their body. That's this very thick rubber. And you're supposed to use this on your windows with your 2-year-old toddling down below you, breathing this stuff. It's very, very, very toxic stuff. So in September, you'll be able to click on Windex. It'll tell you the ingredients in it. You click on it, it'll take you to a government fact sheet, ATSDR, or one of them, and you'll be able to look for yourself. This is, by the way, it doesn't appear on the back of the bottle. Your shampoo or your conditioner or your cleaning products don't show the ingredients. the actual chemical ingredients of what's in them. They don't have to. That's the law. Okay, buy local. We mandated ourselves to buy local when available, and to create local markets. We have this much local production. I live on the largest organic vegetable farm in eastern Washington, and we have 15 acres of production. That is a crime. We have this huge amount of people that our local corporate health food store, which happens to be owned by URM, who doesn't care about its employees, doesn't bother to recycle, cooks all of its bistro stuff in aluminum pans, and doesn't even use organic stuff in their bistro, even though they're selling you organic stuff in their aisles. Where was I going with that? The amount they're selling more than $25,000 of organic produce and conventional, because they have them all mixed together and don't necessarily show on their signs very well the difference. But $25,000 in produce out of that store. There is a need. We have to create the production. So part of what we're doing is we're doing an educational piece, and we're creating the store. So buying local. This bag was created for us. This is one of our local little things. This is Bull Durham hemp. We have a hemp company, an international or national company that deals internationally, but they're based in our town. And so we get our hemp from them. We had a local seamstress make it. We had a local artist make the stamp. And we're trying to do this. We're looking for soap makers. Everything that we can possibly produce locally, we will create our own local market. Zero waste. We will not carry any packaging, and packaging cuts stuff out. When we bring in the produce, we will not take anything that's shrink wrapped. So like English cucumbers, we have yet to have. We didn't have eggplant all summer or all winter because they were shrink wrapping them. We don't bring in little clam shells that have strawberries and other things in them. So that's a policy. We don't do that. And we've told the warehouse, when you have things, like flats of strawberries that come in that are in those, please tell us. We'll buy that. And hopefully that will send a word out to the people that are packaging that way that, there's this place that doesn't do it that way. And not only that, they're educating the whole world about this. So you need to, General Mills knows who my organization is. Believe it or not, a little tiny, less than 2 years old organization. And when we call, they don't want to talk to us. In our store, we now have actually a store that's got bulk items and shelves. We went to a local supplier of used all kinds of hardware and all kinds of stuff. We got our shelves from there under our zero waste policy. We have brought in no packaging whatsoever. People do bring in their leftover bags from their closets and stuff, but we tell people, we have everything in bulk. You bring in your packaging. You didn't bring it? Too bad. Go home and get it. We know that if we provide it, you'll just get used to it being there. And so we're not going to start you out feeding you that way. And it's working. People are bringing their stuff in. We intend to transition out of plastic as much as possible, which means we won't even use people's used plastic bags. We're having bags created also out of hemp that are cloth bags that you'll haul all your vegetables and produce, your bulk, beans, whatever, in these cloth bags. Cloth bags, you don't need plastic. Hey, 100 years ago they didn't have it. Did you know that? Isn't that amazing? You can put your fabulous salad mix, your gourmet salad mix that you hopped your butt down to the farmer's market to get, in a cloth bag, and you spritz it down with a sprayer in your refrigerator. It keeps much better than in a plastic bag. So we really don't need plastic for our food. So, no packaging. Farmland preservation. We have written it into our initial policies that we will contribute both money and resources to farmland preservation in our area. We have to elevate the status of the farmer. We are doing farm tours this summer to take people to the guy who produces honey for Peach Safe Food, the local farms, any sort of local production. We know that we want to be a family of people that we trust. I care about you and your kids, and you're being able to survive and getting enough money. You care about me, and you create a safe product that's not going to harm my children, and we do this as a community. So we're making our dollar choices based on consciousness and what's good for our community of people. And to that end, we established a farmland preservation coalition who met all winter, and we set up at Earth Day. So we've already got work underway. It'll be obviously a few years before we have like lots of money to throw into it, but we are going to set up a program that goes into our community so that people can donate farmland who feel the way that we do. And we've actually had 2 people already say they've got like 50 acres, and yes, they love the idea, and let's do this. So old people who have been farming, who see this mess, they're interested in their land being preserved and not necessarily becoming multi-millionaires, turning their land into some commercial development or some housing development. People care if you give them a chance to make the right decision. Create community. I'm going to come back to that because this is we need community on many, many levels. We need them to speak for policy change, but we also need them because as we make changes in our lives, we need to share information. If you stop using Windex and your mother-in-law comes over and she's like, what do you mean you don't use Windex anymore? You've got a community of people that you can go feel okay about hanging out with, and who your children can go play with the children in that other house because you know that their house is safe, the air in their house is safer. The foods they're eating are along the same line so that your kid doesn't come back going, "Wah!" which is what kids do when we expose them to all these chemicals and horrible pesticides. And believe me, I have 6, I know. A livable wage. We have 2 staff people plus myself at this point. Actually, Peach Safe Food, I'm running 2 different organizations right now, which is really nutty. I work 80 hours a week, and someday this is all going to be launched, and I'll get a little break. I'll get to farm a little bit, maybe. What we ended up having to do, we have a tax-exempt organization, an environmental organization, and we wanted this store to be an educational facility, but also be a store. And the IRS, we fought with them for a year with our attorney, and they just said, no, 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 no. And finally, we gave in. We turned it into a mutual benefit nonprofit corporation. So this is a nonprofit store. It will also have a certified kitchen in it where local farms can come create value-added products in the kitchen there in the store. It'll have a classroom. It'll have this huge romper room because that succeeded for McDonald's, so we're taking them up on that one. And it'll be very friendly atmosphere. So I got off on a tangent there. I was talking about fair pay. We have 2 staff people who basically are donating half of their time right now to get this off the ground, who love it and I can't make them go home most of the time, so it works really well. But we know that we want to have them up to a living wage as soon as the system will allow for that. That's the goal. It's not to bring money into the store. It's also another piece of this is we started this with this much money. We created this store in our community with 0 money, which means it can be picked up. This is food for the people, by the people. The people generally don't have lots of money. So we didn't go take out a $100,000 loan to stock a small store. We said, let's grow this thing and let it be of the people. And like I said, we have 100 families. We order about $1,500 to $2,000 worth of produce a week right now. And that doesn't include all of the other things that we carry. We are child friendly. We believe that part of the problem with our culture is that our children have been separated from us. And so, I mean, there's so many moms, and you know them. They have a baby. 2 weeks later, they turn that baby over to somebody else to take care of them. And they go back to their job because how else are they going to pay their rent and their electricity and their car payment? We believe that that's wrong and that it's really hurting the basic fabric of our culture. And so one of our policies, and with the 3 staff people between us, we have like 12 kids. Our kids come to work with us part of the time. Sometimes we hire someone who runs them down to the park, which is only a few blocks away. But we work with our children, and we want that to be a part of the whole fabric of everything that we do. That children need to be with us. That's how they learn. That's how they get their needs met. So the way that we operate is you're talking to us on the phone, and it's like, Mom, I need you. It's like, hold on a minute, and they take care of it. And you're expected to live with that and appreciate that we're doing that for the greater good of the families involved and for just the very fabric of our society and our city. I'm almost finished. I'm probably running out of time. Okay. It's been really fascinating being here. I was at WTO. I love to go to these things. But what I truly, truly believe is you need to invest your time. You need to know what's happening globally, but you've got to invest your time locally. When you spend your dollars at your farmer's market and you're supporting your local people who have grown food locally, who have created a product locally, you're keeping those dollars here in your community. That is actually helping the farmers in China. And they need to do the same thing. In China, they need to take back their local food system and their local production and start living more like a village. We have to get back to this. In my city, I envision that the village, because it's a large city, is that neighborhoods are villages. And so there's a peach safe food or whatever they want to create in their local community all over the city. And that way people are getting back in touch with each other, the lives, the fabric of the community. All right, now I'll put these out here.
I have a question about that stuff in the can. Is there residual stuff in the food then?
When they did the experiments on it, they haven't done enough, like everything else. We know that scientifically you've got to get it through your head. I have training in biology and chemistry. We know nothing about what we're doing. And it doesn't matter whether you look at genetically modified food, pesticides in the body, we'll look at one chemical, if we look at it at all, and we'll test it on some middle-aged male, this much. It's true. It's true. I mean, we care about you, but what I care about most is the fetus who's developing in the womb, because we have this little bunch of cells who are totally dependent on a hormone delivery system in your body to grow fingers and eyes and the ability to learn and correct neurological circuitry. And all these things we're being exposed to, we're finding out act like hormones, and they go in there and disrupt the very base of the life that's being formed. And I know this firsthand because when I was 18, I climbed poles for a living. I was like strong woman, I'm going to go do a man's job. And I got pregnant while I was doing that job. And I was exposed to a lot of pentachlorophenol, which has a lot of dioxin in it. My daughter's 20 years old. She reads probably on the 5th grade level. She, was her whole way through school. I had her tested. We went through this whole battery of tests. She had deficits in everything. Hearing, motor ability. She still trips. She'll be walking across the room. Whoa! There's nothing there because she's not wired correctly, because I was exposed to a really bad chemical, a whole bunch of chemicals. We are tampering with the very ability to think, to learn, to have fulfilling lives. Yes.
Can you say something about how the nonprofit started? What does that mean?
Okay. As far as I know, we are the only nonprofit food store in the U.S. I've been looking. If anyone can tell me that there's something else, I'd love to know.
The good food stores are 501c.
It really is.
It is.
Wow.
I'm a long-term resident.
Nice. Okay, thank you. I actually had been looking and looking. I couldn't find any co-op or anybody, so that's really good to know. And they were nonprofit, 501c3?
Yes.
Now, it's a 501c3? The IRS let you do that?
I'm not part of the management of the store, but it started as a long time ago, 30 years ago, as part of a church, and out of a small space and grew into this giant store, but they still retain that status. And there isn't an owner, they have a board of directors.
Right.
They put money back in the community.
I'll check that out, because we fought and fought and fought with the IRS, and they wouldn't let us do it. We tried to make it a 501c3. What it means is that all of the money, after purchasing the food, after paying the staff a living wage and meeting, just basic building expenses, go back into the community. So it goes for educational programs, that work. There is a board, just like he was saying, a board of directors who makes sure that the policies that we set up, the vision, stays on track. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. And you
guys will have some time.
My name's Josh Slotnick, and I work part-time for the Garden City Harvest Project and part-time for the Peas program here in Missoula. And what I think I'll do is just kind of follow what these guys have done, tell you a little bit about the project that I work on, and then I'm going to go off for a few minutes on my own spiel about why local agriculture is really important. The Garden City Harvest Project, the mission of the Garden City Harvest Project, which is right here in Missoula, I forgot to say that. The mission of the project is to get high-quality produce to low-income people. To meet this mission, we have a small network of community gardens that are strategically situated in neighborhoods where people need community gardens. These are neighborhoods where people don't have a lot of money, where they have small yards, or they're living in apartments, or around here, really low-income housing means trailers. We have, two that we work in partnership in other organizations, with other organizations. One on the north side, one at the ASUM garden on campus, one off of Mullen Road, one on River Road, one in East Missoula. We also have a 6.5 acre farm, vegetable farm, where we grow food specifically for the food bank and the Poverello Center, which is an emergency food shelter, and the Salvation Army. The partnership with the Peas program. Peas program is part of the university. Peas stands for the Program in Ecological Agriculture and Society. And like I told the tour group the other day, we came up with that funny name because we were really searching for a vegetable acronym that would work, and Peas hit it. Try it with other ones like kale, it just doesn't work. So we got Peas is it. The Peas program, which I'm really proud of, the Peas program has students working on the farm all year round, according to climate, which means fall semester, spring semester, and summer semester. In the summer semester, where we're in now, students work on the farm from 8 to noon, Monday through Thursday. And then on Friday mornings, we have a class, and then we go on a field trip to visit a local farm. The product of the students' work, the food they grow, then goes to the food bank. So students get to do this intensive study in sustainable agriculture by actually doing it, talking about it, going to see people who do it professionally. And then the fruits of their labor, literally the fruits of their labor, go back into the community. And it works out really well. I'll give you a brief overview on how this came to be, since both of you guys did that, and it was really interesting as another nonprofit type person to hear the genesis of those things. 6 years ago, there was a woman who was running the WIC program at the health department named Mary Pittaway. And if you remember 6 years ago, you guys remember the political climate 6 years ago? Newt Gingrich and the contract on America, and they had welfare reform, and